Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd and Long. Hosted by Sparky, Fifer, and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome in another edition of Curd and Long. Steve Sparky Fifer with you. No Ryan Horvath today. In his place, my guy, Crunchy Kevin Holden, sports director at CBS58. You follow him on Twitter at 321QKevin. If you're watching this on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel, you are in for a treat. The man is dressed in a suit. He literally just stepped off the TV set doing sports on the newscast here at like 10:42 at night on Friday night to come do Curd and Long with me, and I appreciate it so much. Also does Telemundo play-by-play. So normally when Kevin Holden is on, I like to touch on all three major teams, and I plan on doing that again tonight. I know most of you tune in for Packers, and we will start with Packers, but I'm warning you now, there will be some Brewers and there will be some Bucks before we wrap up this Curd and Long podcast here today, because Kevin Holden is well-versed in doing everything. So I'd like to pick his brain on everything. All right, let's start with the Packers and the draft. Your thoughts on the Packers 2024 draft class this year, Kevin Holden?
Yeah, I tell you what, Sparky, first of all, thanks for having me. Like as you said, every time we do this, it's an absolute blast. So yeah, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Anytime we can talk a little sports, I'm definitely down for it. It is I don't think it was that unexpected where the Packers went from a draft standpoint, especially going late in the first round. That's a very Packers kind of pick, right? An offensive lineman, very good athlete, the upside that's there is going to work out just fine. And then, going from there, addressing a couple of key positions of need. They really wanted to focus on the secondary. I thought they did pretty well there. I think Evan Williams is an interesting pick as a fourth round selection. And I don't know what to make of him in year one, but I think eventually there will be a point with him where we'll have a better sense of what he can give, not just on special teams, but the defense overall. A running back was an interesting pick, given that the Packers have sort of revamping a bit of that room. And as early as they did it, that was a third rounder. That was a bit of a surprise to me, but the fact that they went heavy in the secondary, the fact that they went heavy in the offensive line, no surprises there. I think it was a good professional draft from Goody and company. Didn't really have any major issues with reaches or anything else with the picks. They do a lot of research, and I think it paid off.
I would talk about the Marshawn Lloyd pick, the USC pick. I was lobbying hard leading up to this draft that I wanted a running back on day two. Again, I wanted the running back out of Tennessee, Jalen Wright. I'm fine that they took this kid out of USC. I'm all good with that. I think part of the reason you do it is two reasons. One, you didn't get really the production you wanted out of that two running back and A.J. Dillon until the second half of the year. Then he started running harder and being more of what you wanted, but it took to that point to get there. And then two, you wanted a dynamic runner that was more like your first running back, I think, as your second running back. And third, I guess there's three reasons. I don't know how long Josh Jacobs is destined to be in Green Bay. Like I could see him being here 2 years and being like, that was fun. See you later. Marshawn Lloyd, it's your job. I could see it being 1 year and then being like, he's better than you. We're going to go with him. And it's not to take anything away from Josh Jacobs, but let's face facts. Man got some wear and tear on him from Alabama. Man's been given the ball a lot with the Raiders. He was a leading rusher in the NFL a couple of years ago because he got a ton of carries. He's a very good running back. Not taking anything away from him, but we know Goody, and at a certain point when he decides you're coming to the other side of your career, he rolls and goes and finds somebody that's on the incline of their career, Kevin.
Yeah, and it's an interesting change that happened in that running back room from last year to this year with Jones gone and Jacobs in. I thought it went from a room that I felt really good about, a good stable room last year when, before A.J. Dillon's 2023 season started, to a room that could be, it's not something that you can really pin down, as you said, where Jacobs is in that path to breaking down. Who knows? The thought is that he has a couple of years left in him, but there's a chance, like you said, that it could be quicker. And I think the idea behind having Dillon a year or two ago was that he could shoulder more of the workload. And I think Dillon showed he really couldn't shoulder that much of the workload or didn't do so effectively. There were some times, but especially early in the year, the Atlanta game is the one that comes to mind for me. So, I thought it was a good idea to at least have one other body in that mix so that you're mitigating it, right? You've got a young player, you've got a chance for something for the future. And look, it's 2024 in the NFL. Running backs are valued differently, they're drafted differently, and for the most part, they're paid differently. So the idea of having someone with some talent, somebody that's got some ability as a runner and also as a pass catcher, that kind of thing, why not go for that on day 2? So yeah, it's a pick that I think if you'd said to me before the draft, I would have said, yeah, all right, I can get on board with it. But now in retrospect, I completely get it.
I think the one position that they didn't really touch until the 7th round, Kalen King, the cornerback out of Penn State, who, if you heard him talk earlier today at this rookie mini camp, he's still bent on the fact that he ended up not getting picked to the 7th round. Time I was like, it was the most stressful time of his life, most stressful 3 days of his life. And he's mad. He can clearly tell. I think he's mad. I think he's hurt because 2 years ago, he probably was a 1st round pick. And then he doesn't have as good of a year this last season. He falls to the 7th round. But the fact that they didn't take a corner until the 7th round, and then you decline the 5th-year option on Stokes on top of that, I mean, I don't understand. I don't get why you waited so long to go do this. Now, again, King may be a stud out of the 7th round because he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder and try and outwork everybody. That may work out at the end of the day, but I thought for sure they would have went corner earlier.
Yeah, I think you're right about it because you have so much uncertainty in the position. Jair Alexander's whole saga that happened for him that entire season, by itself makes it where I thought they might put a little more value on it. Stokes, as you mentioned, their health issues are there, and clearly they're going to make him earn it in this 1 year. And after that, you're working your way down. You're talking about a Keyshawn Nixon, or you're talking about Valentine. That cliff is quick. You know what I mean? Once you're past those first 2, it really drops off. So it would be great to see Kalen King map out and be somebody who can contribute at that position literally right away. And I agree with you. There's nothing better than seeing somebody with a little extra motivation when they start their NFL career. But I also don't know about hope, pinning my hopes on someone who was still there with a pick with a 2 in front of it, after pick 200. That's pretty deep at that point. That means everybody had several chances to draft him and passed on him. So maybe he's a guy that, with the summer in Green Bay and a little motivation can work himself into the mix.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how that whole thing plays out. Okay, so not only do we have that going on as far as the draft and Packers rookie camp, but today, Friday, as we record this, was the first day Jordan Love could sign a contract extension with the Green Bay Packers. Matt Schneidman of The Athletic ran down the guy that runs Spot Track, I should say, and had a conversation with him. And you can go read the Athletic article if you want to hear read the details and all that other stuff. But it's 4-year extension at $200 million is what he thinks that Jordan Love will be in that range for the Green Bay Packers. Do you do it? Do you do for it $200 million if that's what it is? $50 million a year. And again, the first half of the year, not great, but that was because his receivers didn't know what they were doing and his tight ends didn't know what they were doing. And they're trying to figure out life. Then once they figured out life, he was a baller there in the second half. That's a lot of money for a great second half of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting. You spend years in the development, years in the training and that sort of thing. And I feel like that all went very well. And then your window to decide this on the future is about that long. And, that was a great half of the season for Jordan Love. But, wow, that is a lot of money. Here's the thing, though. If the Packers have been anything over the last 30-plus years, the biggest stability has come from that position. It's allowed them multiple times to draft a quarterback and spend years developing the quarterback, instead of, half of the NFL in the situations where they're rotating quarterbacks every year. They're taking someone to study under someone. I mean, Atlanta's situation is so messed up, but, this is something that Green Bay's had as a huge advantage over the rest of the NFL for 30-plus years. And the thing about paying the money to Jordan Love is one thing, and it could be a ton of money. But if you don't, then what? And what do you do in terms of stability? How do you make this position not a problem the way it is all the way across the league? And I think that's the thing is it's a massive payday on, as you say, a small window that you saw, but I'm not sure there's another option. I think that's what they've got to do. Otherwise, you are really rolling the dice. And clearly what you have in right now with Pratt and with Clifford, you're not talking about NFL starters, I would think, in either of those. So you'd have to go somewhere else. And, it could go wrong in a hurry. So I still think it's the right call to sign him, give him that money.
I think you have to give him that money. I don't think there's any question about it that you have to pay him that money. The good thing for the Packers is, though, for this first 3 years or so, all these guys are on rookie contracts around him, whether it be, guys that are playing wide receiver, tight end, your second, maybe your main running back in 2 or 3 years, and Marshawn Lloyd. Rasheed Walker's not on any type of money deal at this point. Right guard's going to be a rookie more than likely, so that's not going to be any type of money. You're going to have to pay Zach Tom at some point. But if he ends up playing center, that's a heck of a lot less than having to pay a tackle. So you save yourself a ton of money if you move him to center at this point. So they're really, from that position, in a great position of, yes, they can give him that money without really sacrificing a ton of talent early on. Now, this may eventually cost them, 5 to 8 years down the road when they're still paying him this much money as far as what they can surround him with. But for the first 3 or 4 years of this deal, or first at least 3 years of this deal, I think they're good, and they can keep this talent around them and continue to add to it through the draft.
And they don't have to worry about what they've had to worry about of late the last year with Rodgers, salary with dead money, which was such a problem. I mean, it was a necessary step. We knew when Rodgers was gone, there was going to be that dead money for at least a short time. But as that goes off the books, everything seems to work out fine for him. So yeah, they could pay a ton of money to Jordan Love and still be in a bit of a bargain position when it comes to, okay, if they find a free agent that they like, it doesn't matter which side of the ball, somebody that can make the team better. They're still in a position for a few more years where they can sign someone. And the longer Rodgers' career went on, the harder that was to do because he kept expanding that percentage of the cap. It's just the way it works in a salary cap situation. What he was taking was more and more and more. So, if you give Jordan Love this chunk of money with Rodgers' money off the books, you still got a shot at something. Not that they like to splash in free agency, but man, they could,
They absolutely could. Hey, I got a comment here on our Odyssey Sports YouTube page that's for you specifically. So I want to read it because I think you'd get a kick out of it. I hope you like this person because otherwise it's going to be awkward. It says, Kev, an unexpected surprise for my Friday night. Shout out from a colleague from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Exclamation point.
Oh man, who in the world are we talking about here? Is there a name to that one?
There is a name to this, yes. Joseph Myers.
Joseph Myers. Joe, what's going on, man? This is a long way from D-Span. Like he and I worked together, or we worked in the same market. He was a newspaper guy in Dalton, Georgia.
Another Georgia guy.
Yeah. My first job in television was at it wasn't even an affiliated station. It was a converted house. And we did some tape newscast there. I think the whole station had like 9 employees, like counting the PM and the owner and all that. It was a wild situation. And yeah, that's a guy I've kept in touch with through the years. So that's awesome. Joe, good to see you. Glad you're catching up on some Packers football.
Yeah, Odyssey Sports YouTube page. You never know who you'll run across here as we were doing this YouTube. In Georgia, it's almost midnight. If he's still living in Georgia, I don't know where he's living now, but it's almost midnight in Georgia. Steve Sparky Fifer here, Wisconsin Sports Daily, weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 in the afternoon on 1250 AM The Fan. Talk Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks, Marquette, Admirals, whatever the case may be. Kevin Holden there, CBS58, also does play-by-play on Telemundo. As well. Follow him on Twitter at 321Q Kevin. Follow me at Sparky Radio. The other thing about this Green Bay Packers football team, outside of Jordan Love, is what this defense is going to look like under the new defensive coordinator. And to me, when you go into, the OTAs and you go into training camp, that's what I want to see. I want to see what does this 4-3 defense look like as far as how good will Kenny Clark be in it? What will Rashawn Gary look in it? Will Lucas Van Ness look better in this than he did last year, his rookie year in the 3-4? What about Preston Smith? Probably the last year as a Green Bay Packer. What does he look like? There's just so much intrigue to see how everybody looks in their new positions that are used to playing in a 3-4 that I really cannot wait to see what it all looks like.
And did I hear the other day that Preston Smith is the only Packer left over 30 years old?
That's correct.
Gosh, that's so okay. So that tells you one thing. You've got a group of players on both sides of the ball, but we're talking defense here. A group of players that's young, that's impressionable, and that has kind of a bad taste in their mouth after what went on with the previous defensive coordinator, right? Like Devondre Campbell, when he signed with the 49ers, the tirade was something, man. And I think the biggest thing is just going to be separating from that phase. I mean, like you say, what's going to happen specifically to certain players in this style of defense? That's big. But I think attitude and, togetherness and, how this team gels, how the defensive unit gels is also going to be a big thing. There's most of the time, I don't necessarily buy into the motivational side of a certain coach. It was like Rich Bisaccia was different because it's special teams and you need lunatics on special teams, right? You gotta fire them up. But defensively, it's a little different, right? And so I think in this particular group, young, ready to change, ready to mold, ready to do something different. I think how they're handled in these first couple of months will mean something too. My guess, just a guess, is that you sometimes in the off season you see some screaming and yelling and that sort of thing. I think that comes from the defensive side of the ball this spring. I think that group probably got tired of hearing how bad they were, and they knew they were better than that. And I think that's going to be the chip on their shoulder as we go through the off season and then into August and September.
Yeah, Edgerrin Cooper today in rookie OTAs had a one-handed interception back there at linebacker, the Packers' second-round pick. So it'll be fun to kind of see how the rookies meld into what the veterans do, because in a weird way, everybody's kind of learning this system together. This isn't like, they're coming into Joe Barry's defense and these vets know it like the back of their hand at this point, and they got to play catch-up. They're all going to kind of learn this defense, I think, together moving forward. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. All right, let's take a quick time. I'll come back. I want to get into Brewers and Bucks here as well. Every time we have Kevin Holden on, Kurt and Long, we kind of talk all three. When it's Horvath and I, we normally just talk Packers, and that's what this is a Packer podcast. But I feel like I'm cheating the audience if I don't get Holden's views on the Brewers and Bucks too. So we'll do that after this. On the Odyssey Sports YouTube page is where we're streaming this bad boy live. Download it on your Odyssey app or wherever you download your favorite podcast at Kurt and Long. Hey, it's Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM The Fan, Wisconsin Sports Daily, weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 in Milwaukee on 1250 AM The Fan, or you can stream us on Odyssey, wherever you may be around the country if you're a fan of Wisconsin sports teams. He is Kevin Holden, Crunchy, from CBS58, sports director over there, Telemundo play-by-play announcer as well. Follow him on Twitter at 321QKevin. You can follow me at Sparky Radio. All right, let's switch gears here. I talk a little bit about the trader. As the Brewers beat his Cubs team today 3-1. Big fan of that. Ross pitched much better than I expected him to pitch at any point this season for this Brewers team. And the conversation kind of has been umpires, Brewers getting screwed for 3 or 4 games in a row there, and that complete disaster. You are as big of a baseball fan just in general as about as much as anybody I know. Your thoughts on umpires, baseball, the Brewers, and how this whole thing has kind of blown up here in the last week or so.
Yeah, all of it happening together. That's really the thing. Is it was an interference call on Sunday, an interference call on Monday, and then the tempers flaring on Tuesday. It was just back to back days of all of this stuff that's on the periphery, right? And when you have a team like the Brewers, Pat Murphy has this young group. We're talking about this with the Packers. It's a young group that they will go through what young teams go through, which is Sunday after the Aaron Judge non-interference call where that ball hits him in the mitt. Everything fell apart. It was walks and wild pitches and all kinds of problems against a much more veteran Yankees lineup on Sunday. And I thought it was indicative of what happens to a young team, a young pitching staff, someone like an Abner Uribe, who we know is supremely talented, but has had a little trouble keeping the emotions in check. When something bad happens, when a bump happens, it comes off the rails for him a little bit. Now, I go 2 ways with this. First of all, we're talking about the interference calls. What I don't understand is how many things Major League Baseball doesn't make reviewable. I don't get it. There's a chance these days to see 1,000 things in review form. It's no longer just, was it a home run or was it foul or was this person safe or were they out? You can see so many things. So why would they? I understand they don't want to bog the game down, but there were moments in both those games that Judge play opened the floodgates, and then Monday when the bat hit the catcher in the helmet, it was a deciding play in the game. how is that not extensively looked at and ruled properly? Like, I'm not that part. I don't get, but that's a Major League Baseball problem. And then Tuesday, the exchange with Pat Murphy and the ump, with Murphy getting kicked out and then suspended for a couple of games, I thought was a fantastic combination of a man who was frustrated, who'd been dealing with stuff. His team had played good baseball and had come up on the short end a couple of times with a couple of these calls. And I think that was part of what was going on. But the other half is, I think Pat Murphy really understands how to motivate groups like the one he has. And Murphy didn't hold it back. I mean, I'm not really touting the virtues of John Boy Media, but that breakdown.
They knocked it out of the park.
Oh my God. I mean, I watched that multiple times. I'm like, Pat Murphy made me want to stand up and go through a wall. You know what I mean? And so if you're a player on that team, you have to feel the same way. I like the fact that Murphy has this mentality. They're young and he hasn't managed a ton at the big league level, but he's extremely experienced and they're not going to back down. And I thought that was kind of a pivotal moment, because sometimes with a young team, a bad game or two can turn into 10, and it didn't for them. They came back and beat the Cubs on Friday with that 3-run inning. And that 3-run inning was a steal and a single and another steal and another single. There wasn't advanced anything in there. There wasn't launch angle. There wasn't any of it. They scrapped for 3 runs, and it was enough to win the game. That's fun.
He ran a fake steal early in the year to get a run. You don't see that. You just don't see that. Counsell definitely would never do that. And you talk about Pat Murphy. They've had benches clear more in the first month of the season than Counsell probably did in the last 2 years, as far as just coming out and pushing and shoving and whatever the case may be. It reminds me of Phil Garner days, where that's kind of the scrap iron team played like him, and they would fight Terry Bevington's White Sox every time they faced him. Damn near every series, there'd be 2 or 3 fights. The White Sox and Brewers fans would be fighting in the bleachers at county stadiums, and it was just a brawl. The other team that Garner always fought was the Mariners. That, for whatever the reason, Brewers and Mariners always used to brawl. And that was kind of a thing. Now, I'm not saying the Brewers are going to brawl or whatever the case may be, but we're not going to give up. You're not going to punk us and think you're better than us, and we're going to fight back. That type of mentality, I absolutely love. And I love the fact of your catcher can throw guys out. Let's see. And we're going to run the bejesus out of you if you can't. I mean, Bryce Terang, holy crap. Did you see him stealing these many bases before the beginning of the season? This dude's on pace to steal like 60 or 70 bases. Easy.
And win a Gold Glove, I think, or at least be in the run. So you're talking about a guy, and Murphy said it in spring training, that he felt like Terang was going to be on literally a different level as a ball player. And you know how spring training talk is, especially you and I have to sift through it every year. And there's a point where you take 85% of it out, right? You just tune it out. And so when he said it, it registered, but it didn't. I was like, okay. And it turns out that Terang really is. I think, his awareness in the game is really good. Obviously, he's using his legs, using the speed. He's got the great glove, hitting the ball well, at least for the moment. And they're going to play a little bit bigger than what they are for a couple of different reasons. He's got them doing the things that will give them confidence, right? The small ball stuff. If they're young and they're quick, let's steal bases with them. Let's do other things to create runs, get creative. But also the whole not backing down thing. I mean, that's terrific. They're not going to get pushed around. And it's great for those who thought that the Pat Murphy era was going to be this sort of dull holdover, between eras of Brewers baseball. It doesn't look like it. They're still a craftily constructed team that'll scrap for wins. They don't have the great pitching like they did before, but otherwise they're the same team they were basically.
I mean, you're doing Brewers baseball on Sundays and Telemundo and all that fun stuff. What about this starting pitching? I'm not there, man. Like before the season, I was like, okay, 82 to 85 wins, somewhere in that area. When Miley went down, it was like somebody ripped my heart out. Like I don't know how this rotation keeps it together all year with Peralta and Razier too, and what DL Hall, Junis. I mean, literally like 2 of those guys, both of them. Or Ross is going to have to pitch like he did, against the Cubs today a lot more the rest of this year. I just don't know how they make this work without making trades to go find a pitcher or 2, and I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah, it's not in the grand scheme of things for the Brewers, it's probably not the right financial idea, especially because pitching is just such an expensive thing to go get, whether it's in a trade or whether it's, signing a free agent. And I mean, look, Tobias Myers started our last Telemundo broadcast.
And he's starting on Saturday.
Oh, and I had to sit there with Jaime because, Jaime and I will go over some stats, sometimes before Jaime Cano is the color guy for the Telemundo broadcast. And we'll chat some, but every once in a while I'll spring something on him because I didn't think about it before the broadcast. And in the intro, you absolutely see it right there on TV. I said, and Tobias Myers, who 2 years ago was 1-15 with an ERA of 8 in the minors, and Jaime's head just, it just whipped him like, what? He was what? And then last year his ERA in the minors was 5, and here he is scrapping to try to get outs at the big league level. He's pitching against the Yankees on Telemundo. Like, this is it's not a recipe for success, unfortunately. And it's great that that part of it has at least held in some form, some way through 25 or 30 games, but you can't have Peralta and duct tape for an entire season. Something has to change. Like you said, I don't know if they find some bargain basement pitcher to get through a trade, but I don't know if that necessarily fixes where they are. Maybe something from the minor league system. Maybe Mizrowski comes up and that becomes, the next thing. Like in a couple of weeks, he joins the rotation. And I mean, if he's good, if he comes up and can start and is good in the big leagues, is he your number 2 starter? Because he might be. I mean, I don't think anybody else is it, especially with Miley hurt. There's not a number 2 on this team. There may not be a number 3 on this team.
That's where I'm at. And some people believe in Ray. I'm not. I don't think I'm there necessarily that he's a 2 or a 3. He's pitching well enough right now, and we'll see how this holds up, before the end of the year. I think this offense will be fine because you're going to get Mitchell back. You're going to get Yelich back. Churio eventually is going to catch fire by the second half of the year when he figures this out, and he's going to just go on a tear. I'm just waiting for that to occur. And then they'll be fine. The problem is what is going to be left of that pitching staff by they get to that point. And we'll have to wait and see. All right. I wanted to get one more thing in here, and that is the Bucks real quick. We got like 3 or 4 minutes left. Your thoughts, how the season ended, your thoughts on what the future holds.
The injuries were such a tough thing to see because I think the Bucks were putting all of their eggs in the basket of spending the last couple of months of the regular season figuring it out after having all the issues in the first half of the year. I thought it was a little less about wins and losses for a while with Doc Rivers than it was establishing something, getting something together, and then cutting that thing loose in the playoffs. And then you lose Giannis right before the playoffs, and he never plays against the Pacers, and you lose Dame for a portion of it, and Middleton is banged up for a portion of it. All the Jenga pieces fell. There's really, in terms of this year, there's nothing more than just they couldn't have possibly hit those playoffs at a worse time. Maybe 43 games in, when they were in their crisis with Adrian Griffin, might have been the only time in this season that was worse than this, just because of the injuries. And going forward, it's an interesting situation going forward because you don't want these Bucks to be the Phillies of 2010, 2011, 2012. Phillies won a World Series in 2008. They got to a World Series in 2009. And an entire fan base fell in love with, 10 different guys. Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard and Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay and Shane Victorino. And then all of a sudden, those guys, instead of being 28, were 32. And that's a big difference in the baseball world. It's a bigger difference in the basketball world. And I think what it means if the Bucks want to still compete in this window with a healthy Giannis, and if Dame, stays and it's a healthy Dame, they still got a chance to compete. But the pieces around them, I think, will have to change. And so the guys like Brook Lopez, who a valuable contributor, but right now the need for this team is the opposite of what he is. They need youth. They need, something to infuse a little bit to help out. And, the guys like Lopez and even Middleton, I'm not sure that it can continue in that same form. I think they've got to figure out a way to kind of put all those parts together and send them away and come back with parts that are younger and fit the system better. I'm not pessimistic about the Bucks, but it just was terrible to see, to see them try to scrap through a series with the Pacers with, Andre Jackson Jr. playing all the minutes that he's playing. No offense to him, but come on, man.
Pat Beverly. What do you do with Pat Beverly? He's a free agent. The fiasco that was, chucking the basketballs, bumping out and not letting this ESPN producer let her be a part of it. Now, eventually he calls and apologizes to her and all of that stuff. The Bucks call and apologize to her. That's all fine and dandy. I did this on Wisconsin Sports Daily. As far as that's off the court, then there's on the court. He clearly helped his Bucks team on the court without question. He helped them in the locker room without question. But my thing is this ownership group going to say, don't care. He's not putting that uniform on for us again. We're not going through that. Is that going to happen? That's I think it could happen. I think you very well could have Edens and Peter Fagan go, nope, not doing that again. Not going to handle that. He's not going to be a part of our organization. Don't care what you say, Doc. I could very well see that happening. And that would be a relative loss, I think, for that locker room if he's not brought back for Doc Rivers, because I think Doc loves him.
The Bucks do have a level, as a franchise, do have a level of consciousness about a variety of topics, but that could absolutely be one, and it could spell the end of Pat Bev. And I'm all the way on board with you that he showed a value in the playoffs that I think a lot of folks didn't know he had. I mean, he's a guy who helps. He's a guy who brings you emotion. He's a guy who agitates the opposition. But there were times in this Pacers series where he was also the man, or at least one of the top dudes when you talked about, scoring presence, just game presence. He stepped it up. And yeah, it's unfortunate because you're talking about a combination of factors. It would be a big loss, and at the same time, it has a potential to be a big distraction if a lot of that continues, if all of this stuff that happened with him at the end of the season continues on into next season, and the Bucks still struggle, if there's an issue that they pop into. I think that magnifies the sort of thing that Pat Bev did there at the end for the playoffs. And yeah, I'd say greater than 50-50 that he's gone, and that's sad. I thought he was valuable.
Because he's going to get suspended.
Yeah.
Now, that's the last thing I want to talk about is suspension. Silver's going to prove a point here as commissioner. I'm telling you right now. And you can write this down. His is not going to be 5 games. It's just no chance. Because if it's 5 games, Kevin, and if I'm on a bench next season, and some dude's bothering me and I know I'm going to get 5 games, give me a basketball, because I'm going to peg that dude in the head if all I'm getting is 5 games. They're going to make an example of Pat Beverly. 40 games, 30 games, I don't know. It's going to be something crazy, and there's going to be a gigantic fine that's going to go with it. He's going to appeal. It'll still end up at 25 or 30 after the appeal, because they cannot allow that to happen again. He didn't go up in the stands, but you can't mess with people in the stands. And at the same point that is, Silver should be on the phone with the Pacers and that security staff and say, listen, he claims that they asked for help that whole game and you all didn't give him help or reprieve and got those guys out of there. If that's true, that's not acceptable and that cannot happen. If they want somebody out, then they got to get out. You can't just allow them to talk about whoever's personal life or whatever was being said. That's got to stop. That can't be a thing either.
No, and there's a line that's crossed between having the opposition in town and, making some noise and doing whatever and saying the things that we hear have been said in that situation. I'm with you. It's got to be an example. But I was thinking when you were talking about the 5-game thing is that if that turns into it, if what Patrick Beverley did results in a 5-game suspension, Thanasis has a new job. He could have, I don't know, 10 5-game suspensions and just lay injuries and marks on everybody around the league on the process. You know what I mean? He's a guy that could do something like that. I think it's going to be a bit nastier than that. But I also agree that I think Silver would be smart to have the other part of it, the Pacers part of it, out a little bit more in the public, because it's an issue that the league wants to get in front of. They don't just want it dealt with in private. You just don't want it to happen again. So you want, if the league handles it well enough, you can prevent it or at least lessen the chance that something would happen down the road. So I would think this wouldn't be handled in his office. I think it would be handled publicly, very publicly.
No doubt. He is Kevin Holden. Follow him on Twitter at 321Q Kevin, sports director, CBS58. Telemundo play-by-play on Sundays for the Brewers when they're at home. And follow me at Sparky Radio. Kevin Holden, thank you, my friend, so much for doing this on a Friday evening. And now you can go partake in some adult beverages if that is what you choose to do, Kevin Holden.
We'll see. The Saturday is a little bit packed, but it's also tempting and weather's nice. And Sparky, thanks for doing this late too, because life has just been so completely crazy. So I'm glad you were able to do this right as we came off the set. If I had thought it better, we could have done this on the set. I should have just stayed on there, right?
Yeah, that would have been kind of cool. Yes. Also, Kevin Holden, I have a dream, Kevin Holden, because I think you've missed your mark, just in general, and I want to help correct it, and I think we can make some money along with it, possibly.
Okay.
I think I'll be the host, you be the expert. We should do a travel podcast of some sort. Even if it's a minor league baseball travel podcast, or, if we lock in on that, or we just do a travel podcast in general, talking about all the places you and Blaze have been to and all that stuff, and the deals and how you find the deals and what to look for on trips. And I don't know, man. I think you're an amazing person when it comes to doing all this stuff. You've seen so much, been a part of so much, had so many experiences. And the stories and so forth, you could probably help out so many people that want to do similar type things. I think it would be a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, first of all, and it'd be a blast. And last year we took a trip to 3 Hawaiian islands, and it cost us a total of $100 in airfare. And the entire reason it happened was because I was nice to somebody. It wasn't even, you know what I mean? It wasn't some kind of brainiac thing. It was a long story, but along the process, I was nice to someone at a Southwest gate and ended up with a nice little voucher in my pocket.
It's a beautiful thing. He is Kevin Holden. We all aspire to be like him. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Kevin Holden, and we'll be watching on CBS58 and Telemundo.
Sparky, much appreciated, man. Always a blast.
Always good. Toodles.